Mental health has been a slowly unraveling topic in media, but I think its depiction in video games is really interesting. For the longest time, mental health was simply a plot element. It's a superpower that the main protagonist has, or the sole reason why an antagonist commits their horrors, but without nuance and many times without accuracy. I've noticed from my experience with the world of game developers, mental health is something that many struggle with. A lot of the time there are some really cool experimental indie games that cover mental health. Other times, there are not. I think mental health often lets a consumer of media get this sense of otherness that explains something they don't understand. Why did they kill? How were they able to figure that out? I think video games give the ability for people to understand that otherness by putting people in the perspective of the mentally ill or neuroatypical. There are several virtual reality experiences that have been made in order to help neurotypical people understand the overwhelming sensations that come with being autistic, called sensory overload.
Just wait there 1 minute, I'm just going to get a ticket, okay? Alex, just 1 minute. Alex? Calm down. I have to finish this, okay? Calm down. We're going to go home now, okay? No. Alex?
I personally have OCD, where I feel I have a slightly similar experience in public, where every sound, every light, every touch is suddenly overwhelmingly too much, and I have to go home, take off all my clothes for sensory reasons, and lay alone in the dark to recover. So it's nice to see this experience being properly translated so that others can understand and have empathy for those who have a hard time in public. I fully understand that OCD and autism are very different. I'm just saying a thing that is hard to explain is being translated through an experience that can be manufactured in video games. Hellblade is well known for doing a great job of depicting what it's like to suffer from auditory hallucinations and schizophrenia. It does such a great job that Stacy refuses to play it, fearing to be triggered as she has experienced hallucinations due to complications with her bipolar disorder. Great care was given and lots of input was taken from real patients with schizophrenia, so a greater understanding of the mentally ill could be done. And on top of that, the person with schizophrenia was the protagonist and hero, rather than a villain whose only motivation was they had schizophrenia and that made them think a thing was another thing.
Senua suffers from anxiety, depression, delusions and hallucinations.
To achieve this, we reached out to Professor Paul Fletcher, who is a psychiatrist and Professor of Health Neuroscience at Cambridge University, who agreed to consult on the project.
So I've been interested in severe mental illness for quite a long time, and I've been very struck by how under such conditions a person can become very isolated and ostracized, and a consequence of this is that they can become very stigmatized.
Mental health hasn't always been presented in the media in a way that is particularly helpful. It can be challenging to engage people with the subject matter, and there are a lot of preconceived ideas about mental health, and particularly schizophrenia and psychosis, and allows audiences to engage with it in a way that just wouldn't be possible in any other medium.
And we don't want her to be a helpless victim. She's an accomplished warrior who's been traumatized by a very violent past.
I've often been struck by the sense that I get talking to people with psychosis that they do feel themselves on a quest. I mean, it may be a figurative one in which they're simply searching for meaning to explain all the new and unpleasant experiences. And in some cases, people actually experience a genuine physical quest. They're looking for someone or something or some answer, some place. And with the feeling that if they can only achieve that, then there will be a release or a resolution to all of the things that are plaguing them. And one of the very striking things that we found recently is that people with psychosis or prone to experiencing psychotic symptoms may actually be remarkably good at that. Maybe that under some circumstances they're actually capable of using their prior knowledge to really enhance the way in which they see patterns and put things together. Psychosis can't really easily be understood as just some malfunction of the mind. It's actually a very creative process where somebody constructs a world. And if we recognize that that's what we're doing all the time anyway, constructing our own reality. It may help us to understand.
These uncomfortable experiences in video games are carefully made to help people understand how others see the world. I think it's a valuable tool in helping others understand. We still have issues in video games where characters with mental illness are over-vilified. Far Cry 3, we have Voss Montenegro, who is evil because he is so crazy. What kind of crazy? Why? No, you don't understand. He's crazy.
Drug addict, pirate, and all-around psychopath, Voss Montenegro is a major antagonist of Far Cry 3, and the arch-enemy of the game's playable protagonist, Jason Brody. Infamous for his monologue on the definition of insanity, Voss is certifiably unhinged, perhaps more so than most of the antagonists in the Far Cry series.
He's a creature of this rabbit hole that the game incurs in. So there's this other layer to the game. There's the real layer, which is the island layer, but then there's this kind of Neverland, Alice in Wonderland layer to the game, and he's sort of the Cheshire Cat.
Insanity is doing the exact same fucking thing over and over again, expecting shit to change. That is crazy. But the first time somebody told me that, I don't know, I thought they were bullshitting me, so boom, I shot him. The thing is, okay, he was right. I'm gonna chill. The thing is, all right, the thing is I killed you once already. And it's not like I am fucking crazy. It's okay. It's like water under the bridge. Did I ever tell you the definition of insanity?
Kefka from Final Fantasy VI, he is an evil, crazy clown.
So to try and highlight that there were maybe a few screws loose within Kefka's mind, he wrote in that an accompanying soldier would dust off his shoes despite them being in the middle of a desert. It was completely off the cuff, with Katase just following his intuition, but it paved the way for how Kefka's personality was woven into the rest of the story. As he noted in a blog post on 1UP, in preparation for the launch of Dissidia, if he hadn't made that change, Kefka would have likely ended up being a completely different type of character.
And sometimes it's not even really the game's fault. Sometimes a player can just see a character is different in some way and assume they must be evil. Honestly, that's on us, the player, including me. For example, in Life is Strange, 2 different neuroatypical characters are painted to be the main villain simply for being different. Not by the developers, but by the fandom when trying to find someone to blame for being the big bad. One is Samuel. I recall much of the fandom suspected him of being the big bad because of how, quote, creepy he sounded. But his, quote, creepiness was more due to him being someone who is neuroatypical. He has speech patterns and interests that point him out as different, and because of that, he was vilified. I think this type of pointing fingers within the fandom falls in line of how, when there is a problem, finding the easiest scapegoat usually means finding someone who is different and that we don't understand. We don't understand someone who commits acts of cruelty, and we also don't understand a neuroatypical person. So if we don't understand either of them, then they must be one and the same. This type of thinking is very prevalent in society and is part of the othering many people use in order to find someone to blame for conflicts problems. Moving on to another character who got unfairly judged, I need to preface this with me knowing I'm touching a complicated subject. Nathan Prescott committed violent crimes that he needed to go to jail for, and then get serious psychiatric help from a team of doctors to recover from his mental illness. From my perspective, and evidence in the game, Nathan Prescott was a teenager who was refused proper psychological and medical treatment because of his father, and Mr. Jefferson, a mentally healthy person, took advantage of that in order to get a henchman of sorts. Nathan is still responsible for the actions he took and the people he hurt. But my main concern here is the reaction from people who played Life is Strange. You can find one of his medications in the boys' locker room, and the reaction from the fan base and theories that came from it were so disturbing and frightening to me that it made me very aware of how many people still see mental illness. As someone who has been on antipsychotics, and Stacy has been on the exact same drug as Nathan, it was hurtful to see so many people look it up on Wikipedia and make such weird conclusions. Theories about how Nathan was bipolar and swinging moods several times in the space of a few hours, or how his madness was the core reason for the abuse of all the girls, just simply because he was mentally ill. He was the only problem. And he isn't even the only bad guy. For some reason, Frank is seen as a fan favorite despite being the one who knowingly supplies rape drugs to Nathan and engages in a sexual relationship with a teenage girl. Sometimes I wonder how people would see him if he too had an antipsychotic prescription in his trailer. Would they be less likely to dismiss all these details? I guess my point is that people are so easy to take "they're just crazy" as a good enough reason for someone to be evil. But even in the case of Life is Strange, the truly evil person was someone of completely sound mind, with no psychosis at all, simply a person who enjoyed having power over defenseless girls. People always want to know how serial killers think, but at the end of the day, it's not that complicated. They just hate the type of person that they like to murder. Maybe don't not use the fact that people see crazy and find it to be an easy scapegoat, and use that for the red herring. But there are many times in media and video games where the bad guy is bad because he's insane. Insane, different, obsessed, a state of mind that we simply do not understand, an easy way to explain a concept we cannot grasp. What kind of person would commit something so cruel or gross or disturbing? Surely someone who was crazy or a psychopath, maybe OCD-based need to be clean. But the truth of the matter is that even the people who are diagnosed with what we perceive to be psychopathy are rarely ever violent offenders. What is now known as antisocial personality disorder is not necessarily a violent outcome. The biggest factor of someone with ASPD becoming violent is if they were treated violently or neglectfully growing up.
Not forming strong attachments unless it's to get what you want. That type of manipulation, that's much more associated with what people call psychopath. They can work on Wall Street and be really good scientists. Detachment from other people actually helps them to do their job. They don't have to be killers. Most of the stories that we see are about murderers, and that's not realistic.
We like to think that Light from Death Note was just a psychopath, or Mr. Jefferson was a crazy sociopath. But the truth of the matter is that people like that are not crazy. They're just assholes. 95% of violent crimes are committed by people who are not mentally ill, while the mentally ill are 10 times more likely to be victims of violent crimes than people who are not mentally ill. Why? Because most people who want to commit a violent crime want to have a victim who cannot fight back or won't be helped by society. This would be the mentally ill, the homeless, or groups of people who are discriminated against in society. In the real world, the majority of horrible crimes are committed by sane individuals who are making selfish choices that make them feel good, or give them power, or money, or even just to satiate a need to feel power over another person. We just like to blame mentally ill people for what we don't understand because it makes us feel safer, that no one like us could possibly commit the horrible things that happened. Since this video is about mental health, it's going to automatically be put under restricted ads, which means that instead of having $1 per 1,000 views, I'm probably going to get 3 or 5 cents per 1,000 views. If you would like to help support this video, you can donate on PayPal or become a patron, or even join the channel by clicking the join button below. You don't have to do any of those things. I'm just saying if you gave me $1, it's probably more than this video would ever make. So I would really appreciate that, but it's in no way required.